thank you all for attending, and thank you, Greg, for that lovely introduction. We all look forward to the preservation plan. So yeah, so I will just get started. I'll just jump right in here and say, that I am the Built Environment Compliance Reviewer for DAHP. And so I'm going to take you through what our expectations are as far as how the consultation process would work for the 3 different regulatory reviews that we perform at DAHP. And this is all specific to the built environment. And I also want to say ahead of time that we often get the question of, when is DAHP going to have a policy about this, or does DAHP have a policy? And most often the answer is going to be no, because the consultation process itself is we try to keep it as consistent as possible, and that's something that I'm trying to do here as well. But having policies would just it would be too conflicting. And as soon as we did put a policy in place, we would probably have a project that would make us undo it. So we do not typically have policies, but we do have expectations. So that's what we're going to take you through today as far as how to consult with us. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So first, I want to show you a little bit. So first, I want to introduce you to the DAHP consultation corgis. On the left, we have Howard, and on the left is Lilo. And they are off today, but they wanted to make sure that they were included in the presentation to offer little bits and pieces of information for you. So I just wanted to share with you kind of how the compliance review at DAHP is organized. As far as, so starting at the top, we of course have Dr. Rob Whitlam, who performs 106 and 0505 for archaeology reviews. And then we have our 2 transportation archaeologists, Dennis Wardlaw and Sydney Hansen, and our local SEPA archaeologist, Stephanie Jolivet. And they all come to me when they have projects that have a built environment component. And then when we have the built environment involved, we have Michael Hauser, who's our expert at getting things listed and what's eligible, Nick, our expert for effects and design questions, Greg, our expert for planning questions, and of course the preservation plan itself, and Kim Gantz, our WISAARD expert and forms questions. And so the one thing that I really want to convey in this presentation, or in this slide specifically, is that many of you have been working with DAHP longer than I've been here, and we're not perfect. Me coming in has kind of reorganized the way the BEU operates. I am intended now to be a kind of one-stop consultation shop for all the regulatory reviews. So especially for like 106, I'll take you from initiation all the way to an MOA, although hopefully we never get to an MOA, right? So you might have questions that if you want to know if we're going to think it's eligible, so you're going to ask Michael and things like that. But if you're having questions and you're doing a survey of some sort and it's under a regulatory review that I am going to be reviewing, your question should probably come to me first. And if I have further questions, then I will take it to the appropriate person. But that's something that I really want to convey here is if you're doing anything under a regulatory review, I will be your point of contact for DAHP, for the built environment. So moving on, we'll just get started with the big boy here. It's Section 106. It's the federal regulations that has inspired a lot of what has happened since then. So first, I want to acknowledge that we do have an inbox specifically for Section 106 consultations. It is at the top of the slide here, 106.dahp.wa.gov. So if you are doing anything under the 106 compliance, we ask that all the consultations be sent directly to that inbox, and you might know who the reviewers are going to be. So if you know Rob is going to review the archaeology, you can CC Rob. If you know that it's a transportation project and Dennis or Sydney are involved, you can CC them, or maybe you send it directly to them. I know they operate a little differently. And then if there are like HPI forms, feel free to CC me, but we always ask specifically to make sure that you send it directly to the 106 inbox. That helps multiple people beyond just the reviewers have access to that inbox. So if I'm not around, then someone else can take a look at it, and we can get you a response as soon as possible. So the steps of Section 106, I'll just take you through that And so we start with consultation, initiating consultation, and that often is started by consultation on the area of potential effects. And so when it comes to the built environment, we understand that there's the ground disturbing area, and then there might be more effects that to the built environment specifically. So we want to know, we want a description of the area of potential effect and a justification for how it was defined. What effects did you anticipate, and how are they considered in the APE? And one size does not fit all. So you might have a sidewalk project in downtown Redmond, and you're doing very similar work there to a project in Spokane. But we're not going to expect the APE to always be the same, even if it's a very similar project. We want to understand that the context of the area is considered, and also like different effects and different potential for effects. So just including that is really important for the built environment as well. And then if you also want to include methodology, a justification for that. So if you're saying your APE is so large, but you're not going to survey everything, we want to know how that decision was made and the factors that were included in that decision, because we have to agree with it. And I need to know that I can be on board with this methodology. And before I get any further, I also want to say that we do ask that we be consulted separately on each step, so that we can do it one step at a time and get everything cleared up to make it as smooth as possible. But we do understand a lot of times maybe you want to lump things together, especially APE and methodology. That makes sense. If you want to do the whole like APE 2 effects in one letter, in one consultation, you're welcome to do that. But it's just a matter of being prepared that we might have questions about how your APE was defined, and we won't even get to eligibility or effects before we can resolve those issues. So it's just a risk management process for you. So after we have methodology, the consultant or you have done the survey, then we have eligibility, and there's the 4 National Register criteria and the 7 aspects of integrity. And Michael will get into the specifics about how we expect those to be balanced and the narrative to be written later on today. And then we have effects, the definition of an adverse effect, which I don't need to get into here, and then resolution of adverse effects, which always has to end in an MOA. So next we have Governor's Executive Order 0505. Again, we have a specific inbox. It is 0505 at dap.wa.gov. And if you're doing anything under this order, we ask that the communication be sent directly to the 0505 inbox. And again, if you know the reviewer, you're welcome to CC them, but always make sure that you send it to the 0505 inbox. So when is 0505 even considered? Specifically, it is capital state funding, and it has to be construction funding. So if it's pre-design or design, we always welcome like questions, and we're happy to look at it and let you know if we're going to have concerns or if we won't. But we often don't provide formal comments or like specific details of our expectations or what our thoughts are until it gets to the construction phase. And then so once we have that funding, 0505, it requires all state agencies to consult with DAHP, Goya, and the tribes to consider how projects might impact significant cultural and historic places. We recognize that there is no specific process outlined in the current version of 0505. So we just ask for the built environment to follow standard historic property protocol, which we consider as outlined in how the regulations for Section 106 are defined, but we definitely take a looser interpretation of that, and we're happy to work with each state agency and what they're able to do and what the funding is and just what are we able to accomplish. We definitely, there's 0505 is definitely it's a different process, but we do try to, especially when it comes to how we define effects and adverse effects, we do look to Section 106 for how we make those decisions. We highly recommend that you contact us early and often. If you are a state agency and you're hiring a consultant and they're telling you, what it's going to take to get something through DAHP, they have your best intentions in mind, but no one can tell you what we want except us. So they might provide you guidance on a previous project, or you might have your own experience on a previous project and think that you know what we're going to want for a current project, but that might not be the case because every project is different. One size does not fit all. We do ask that the cultural resource work, including the built environment, be commensurate with the scope of work. We have the Easy One form for ground disturbing activities, and this can also be used as providing us just a first look. If you're not even sure what to send us, sending us an Easy One form is a good first step. And then from there, we can respond and tell you what more information we need, if anything. Easy Twos are for non-professionals, for built environment resources over 50 years in age, or 45 maybe. We often recommend a 45 age gap or age threshold. There's two specific reasons, and that's because if you're basing it off tax assessor dates, those are often inaccurate. So it gives you a bit of a leeway there, and then also to consider the time in which it might take for the project to actually go to construction, at which time the resource would become 50 and therefore meet the minimum threshold for eligibility. We might ask for full historic property inventory forms if the building is proposed for demolition. So be prepared for that, because this would be our last time to get that information. Historic property inventory forms must be filled out by a cultural resource professional. I think that's all I have on this slide. So we'll move on to the State Environment Policy Act, or SEPA, as it's more commonly known. We also have an inbox specific for SEPA. It is sepa@dahp.wa.gov. And SEPA for the built environment is very, I'm sorry, I can't think of the word I want to say. It's very, DAHP does not have a lot of options under SEPA for the built environment. I guess it's really up to the local jurisdictions. They're the decision makers. When we're sent SEPA checklists, that is when we provide comments. And when we respond, our comments are just comments. The final decisions, which would include incorporating our requests, like say you want to demolish a historic house and we believe it's eligible, and the only thing is that the only review that's happening is a SEPA, and we ask for an inventory form to be done as mitigation, it would be up to the local jurisdiction to condition the demolition permit with that request. We cannot require anything. Our comments are only comments. And each jurisdiction is completely different. I still haven't learned them myself, so I don't know. I'm still trying to learn when I write comments. Can I expect to hear back or not? It's very up in the air every time. And then as far as the demolition of listed properties listed in the in the National Register of Historic Places, we do expect it to trigger an environmental review, but again, we can't make any requirements. We would just highly encourage that to happen, because the demolition of a listed property would meet the definition of an adverse impact to a historic property under the law, but we cannot require that review to occur. That would be, again, up to the local jurisdiction. Oftentimes, you might complete an HPI form under SEPA, and oftentimes, unless the local jurisdiction specifically asks us to make a determination, we accept the HPI forms and we review them for their completeness. She'll tell you more about her process, where when forms are submitted, she often does a quality control check. And so she can do that review and accept them, but we might not make a DOE unless specifically requested by the local jurisdiction. So for all of these processes, and more specifically, I guess 106 and 0505, we expect consultation to be initiated by a letter from the lead agency. And we ask that that letter include who is the lead agency, what the regulatory context is, what is your project, and provide a description, what activities are going to occur. And then also, back on my 106 slide, and I mentioned, how you can ask us to consult on just APE or methodology and split it all up or lump it together. So just specify what parts of that are you asking for consultation on and concurrent, and then what do you want from DAHP in response? Do you want a letter? Do you want a formal letter in response, or a formal response of some sort? Or are you just looking for general comments? So just being specific about what you're looking for from us and what is the context. So consultation, again, more specifically under 106 and 0505, it's a government-to-government consultation. It's between the lead agency and SHPO DAHP. And then the consultants, you're down here you're happening under here, you're working for the lead agency. Your work represents lead agency. Lead agency, if they accept your work and send it to us for consultation, it reflects upon them. So at any point, we under 106 or 0505, we may ask for more information. And it's, again, I recognize that I am coming in to a process that a lot of you have already experienced, and so I have feedback that you're not maybe perhaps used to, but we do have this opportunity. We always have this opportunity to ask for more information, and that could include clarification, what sources were used that maybe aren't clearly identified to make decisions, more historic context, either in the report or in the forms for each individual resource. For the project itself, what alternatives were considered, if any, and then we could also ask, further consideration under a criteria. Those are just some of the majority of what our comments tend to be, but it could be there are other options as well. So WISAARD. At this point, consultation is not a WISAARD tool. We ask that any consultation letters be kept out, and we do not receive notification if something is submitted in WISAARD. So that is, again, why we emphasize sending an email to the regulatory inbox. That's how we will know that something is ready to review and that you are ready for us to look at it. And as far as your report itself and the HPI forms, it's important to make sure that the forms that you're saying are a part of the project are attached to the project in WISAARD. And that includes forms that might have a previous determination of eligibility. Because even if that eligibility was done within the last 10 years, you're not asking for us to look at it again, but it still needs to be attached to the current project so that it can be, so that we understand that it's a part of this project, but it's just, the eligibility has been previously determined. And it's important for project tracking and for record keeping for the future people in these roles. And so the most important thing to know is that we only begin reviews after we receive a request for consultation from the lead agency. So under 106, that's the lead federal agency, and under 0505, it's from the lead state agency. So if you're consultants and you're emailing us to tell us that a report is ready, we appreciate it, but we need to know that the lead agency is ready for us to look at it. So we need to hear from them, because we need to know that they've looked at it, they approve it, they agree, and we need a letter stating that from them as well. So I just want to take you through a little bit about the process itself and things that I'm looking for. So when we have areas of potential effect or impact, like I said before, one size does not fit all. And here, I just kind of drew like a blob. I don't know why I did that, but let's just say, I don't know, they want to build a wall around Tacoma. So what I would, so say it's FEMA and they want to build a wall. And so I'm going to want to know, how is it defined? What effects did you consider? And does the map match the written description? So if you're saying, that the APE is the footprint of construction and is considering adjacent parcels, then we want to see the adjacent parcels drawn into the APE, because when you follow the regulations, you're only expected to survey what's in the APE. So we want to make sure that the boundaries match the description, and we want to make sure that we can agree that you considered all the effects that we're concerned about and that it's drawn appropriately. The methodology essentially is if it's 50 or 45, depending on what you decide to do, and it's in the APE, essentially that's saying that you're saying that it has the potential to be affected. So we would expect it to be recorded and evaluated. And if you're going outside of that methodology, and you're saying we only need to survey a certain portion of the APE, that's definitely a decision for the federal agency to make, but we need to know how that was made and why, because we need to agree to it as well. So you've done the survey, you've done the report, and the agency, you've looked at it and you sent it to DAHP for review. So just a few things that I'm looking for when I review the report as well. And you can see our standards for cultural resource reporting as well. I always try to make sure that if I have comments that I refer to the specific parts of those standards. So the most common things that come up are going to be the project description, making sure that it's clear and also very specific, methodology that's justifiable, a historic context that is specific to the APE or API, and that the survey results align with everything. And so for the historic context, the one main point I want to get across is that the context is intended to contextualize the historic resources that were identified, right? So, so definitely the history of the state and the county are important to an extent, but what we're really concerned about is, this residential neighborhood, when was it platted, who surveyed it, and when was it developed, and is it post-World War II? Okay, so then it's connected with like these really significant parts of history. And it's also important to know now that the historic period has entered the 1970s. So describing that history into the 1970s will be important because those are the resources that you're surveying. And so it's also very important to make sure that the context you provide is a context that can be applied to the resources you found, and vice versa. I mean, it's intended to limit the amount of work that we're really expecting, because we expect that the context in the report matches the resources that were identified and how they would be eligible, and that's to help contextualize, especially for criterion A, which Michael will get into later. So the survey results, we just ask for 3 essential things: the data, your analysis and interpretation, and your recommendations. And we just ask for you to show your work and how you took us through that process. Your keys to success are going to be to involve DAHP and the tribes early and often, and to never hesitate, also never hate, but never hesitate to contact us with questions. And again, if you have a question that's specific to the built environment under a regulatory context, contact me.